Stephen Harper. Here's a guy who got elected saying he was going to cut spending to the bone. Then he became the biggest spending prime minister in Canadian history. Now he's running deficits that would make Pierre Trudeau blush. He is a no down payment, no payments forever kind of prime minister. Now, on his website, he claims that he's an economist, but I ask you, has anyone actually seen his diploma? Because this guy changes political philosophies the way the rest of us rotate our tires. Imagine the leader of a G8 country boards a government aircraft in his nation's capital. He flies 12 hours to Vladivostok, Russia. Once there, he enters a hotel room. He orders his Minister of International Trade to sign a secret agreement with the Chinese government. This agreement will not be debated or voted on in Parliament. It will be ratified by Cabinet, once again in secret. So, is this a scene from the latest Bond movie? Sadly, no. It is the further adventures of Stephen Harper. Who is this guy? Since when do Canadian prime ministers sign secret agreements with the Chinese in Russia? Was Dr. Evil there? Was there a naked lady painted entirely in gold? Don't get me wrong, I'm not anti-trade. I expect that my government is out there negotiating trade agreements with countries, some of them totalitarian regimes. But that doesn't mean we have to act like them. Call me old-fashioned, but I believe citizens have a right to have some clue what their government is doing. And it's not like we haven't done this before. Canada signed a free trade agreement with the United States in 1988, but it was debated in Parliament. Heck, there was an election on it. We all got to vote on it. And by the way, that trade agreement with the United States, our closest friend and ally, could be canceled by either party with 6 months' notice. This agreement with the Chinese, 15 years' notice. Apparently, they insisted on that. Look, I have no idea if this agreement is a good thing or a bad thing, but I know this. This fetish for secrecy has to stop. This government got elected by promising to be accountable and transparent. By avoiding the accountable, they become more transparent every day.
This is a Canadian project that is changing the Canadian experience, that is changing our politics, that's changing our economics, that's changing our international reputation abroad, that is changing everything we thought we knew about this country.
It's a big wrong. It is a huge wrong, and there probably is, criminal activity going on to suppress, a report. If it happens and nobody sees it, it's like a tree falling in the forest. Does anybody hear? Does anybody care?
We've got protocols in place. Premier just signed a protocol as late as
the Environment Minister of Alberta, Rob Renner, even recently stated in the legislature that it is not the job of Alberta Environment to act as an advocate for the environment. And that's a stunning statement.
You're looking at staffing issues. You're looking at, people not trained to do their job appropriately. Management focused on the other end of the equation. Industry or a government not being able to monitor, or not monitoring. Monitoring organizations not telling the truth. There's a big failure here waiting to happen.
Did any of that surprise you?
It all surprises me. This is Canada. This is a huge surprise for me. I'm from Canada, I'm Canadian, so I'm proud of Canada. I speak as a Canadian. Why don't they talk about what's happened to science in the government? This government has ignored science to the point where science is not even an issue. And science is the backbone of our future.
It has been suggested that the Harper government, previously known as the Government of Canada, dislikes science. Now, I never really bought into this, but I'm starting to come around. Although I figure they can't be against all scientists, just scientists that study things that don't matter, like water. Case in point, the Experimental Lakes Research Facility. Now, if you haven't heard of it, why would you? It's basically 17 government scientists that operate a living laboratory that encompasses 58 freshwater lakes. Not very sexy, but in the world of science, they are rock stars, renowned the world over. Now, to be fair to the Prime Minister, as far as scientists go, they're probably the very worst. I mean, think about it. They're up there living in tents and shacks with their big bushy beards, eating mung beans out of mason jars, trying to figure out what different chemicals will do to our drinking water. They're the people who figured out the acid rain problem. And now the Harper government is closing them down to save money. How much money? $2 million a year. But here's the kicker. It will cost $50 million to shut them down. Wow, someone really doesn't like fresh water. Now, I admit, I am biased here. In the interest of full disclosure, I'm a drinker. I drink water at home, at work, heck, I put it in my coffee. But to me, this goes to the very heart of who we are. When I think about what makes Canada great, fresh water is right at the top of the list. We have over 2 million lakes in this country and more than enough people who are willing to mess with them. My Canada includes weird scientists who are devoted to keeping our water clean.
Now, cholangiocarcinoma is a cancer of the biliary tract. And by the time the diagnosis is made, very often the patient is beyond treatment. I actually saw 2 cases in the community, 2 tissue sample documented cases. The stats tell us that I should not be seeing this disease any more than 1 in 100,000. We have a population for CHIP that by the municipality's census in Wood Buffalo, it stands at 744.
Any physician who has the guts to step forward and say, I think there's a problem, I care for these people, and I believe that we have rare forms of cancer here that shouldn't be here, and I believe that there might be an environmental cause. That person is just raising a concern. He's asking for involvement from the greater community to try to figure out what the problem is. And instead, what he's met with is government, Health Canada or the Alberta government coming down on this doctor to try to silence him.
Great to be here.
Explain what tar sands means for you in Canada and how it has affected your whole country.
The tar sands are the single largest industrial project on Earth. The scale is almost incomprehensible if you've never been there. They are not only the single reason that Canada's climate pollution is going up, that we will not meet any of the targets, even the weak targets that have been set, but they're also the most toxic project in the country. They're polluting our water and our air. The tar sands produces 300 million liters of toxic sludge a day that is just pumped into open pit lakes that now stretch about 170 kilometers across Canada. And, you know, one of the important things about what's happening in Canada right now is that Canadian policy on climate change, on environment, on many issues is being held hostage to the goal that this federal government, the Harper government, and the oil industry have of expanding the tar sands no matter what the cost. You know, oil corrodes. It's corroding our pipelines and leading to spills and leaks that are threatening our communities, but it's also corroding our democracy. What we're seeing in Canada is literally the elimination of 40 years of environmental laws in the last 2 years in order to make way for quick expansion of tar sands and pipelines. I mean, the Keystone is not the only pipeline this industry is proposing. It's a spider web of pipelines across North America so that they can try and expand this dirty oil as quickly as possible.
And the New York Times had an interesting editorial called Silencing Scientists, and it said over the last few years, the government of Canada, led by Stephen Harper, has made it harder and harder for publicly financed scientists to communicate with the public and with other scientists. What's going on?
Well, first of all, the government has shut down the majority of scientific research in the country that had to deal with climate change. This is a government in denial, and they do not want to talk about climate change. So last year they shut down the Atmospheric Research Station, which was one of the most important places in the world to get climate data. They shut down the National Roundtable on Environment and Economy. They've fired hundreds of scientists, and the ones that are left are being told that they can't release their research to us, even though it's taxpayers-funded research. They're also being told that they can't speak to the press unless they have a handler, and it's an approved interview. They have to have a handler from the Prime Minister's office.
Canada's Information Commissioner investigating now whether the federal government is breaking the rules by imposing limits on some scientists and what they can say and when they can speak to the media. The report gives countless examples here. The 2012 Canadian scientists from Environment Canada attending the International Polar Year 2012 conference in Montreal, essentially being told here, if they're asked for an interview, say you'll get back to them, don't talk to a journalist there.
There's a huge problem here. Publishing is one thing, but why aren't these folks allowed to talk to the media? Why aren't they allowed to talk about the work that they're doing? We have numerous examples of this not being the case, and you've seen quite a number of editorials recently, whether it's scientific publications or the Science Writers Association coming forward and saying, what is going on here? Let our scientists speak. And It's kind of disturbing that they're doing that and they're saying that about our government, about the Canadian government. And even the Science Writers Association, they won a Freedom of Press Award talking about us and our country and the fact that we're not letting our scientists
John McCallum, what's your view? I'm reading some of these letters here. Here's a scientist named David Tarasic, Experimental Studies, Air Quality Research Division, saying to a reporter, I'd be delighted to talk to you, but I'd rather doubt I'm allowed to. I'm required to refer you to the media relations. My apologies for the strange behavior. Is that normal?
No, I think this is quite frightening, Orwellian, 1984-ish, and it's Canadian taxpayers who pay the salaries of these scientists, and now they're not being allowed to communicate through the media their findings to Canadians. This was never the case in Canada before. It's not the case in the United States today. It's an unprecedented move for the government to muzzle taxpayer-financed scientists.
Kelly Leach, I'm trying to get it. When you read this, there's essentially, spin lines that the department is telling the scientists to read. Has industry been approached about paying for this? And you're supposed to say this. I'm a scientist. I'm reading this. I am not in a position to answer that question. I'd be happy to refer you to their appropriate spokesperson. Then there's a whole list of things of what to say should a journalist ask you. Okay response, better response. I guess my point is, why feed scientists lines about research that taxpayers are paying for?
Exactly.
Why can't they just talk to us about their research?
Well, let's be very clear, Evan, they do talk to you. You've had ample opportunity, and you do get opportunities to speak to scientists all the time. And I've mentioned several times now on this program, whether it be over 1,000 scientists that have done interviews and publications at Environment Canada and published with respect to their research done at Agriculture Canada. That means there's more available. There's more people to speak to.
But Kelly,
that means that there's great young scientists out there who can talk to you.
You're answering a question that I'm not asking. I'm asking, why then, if scientists are allowed to say whatever they want, am I reading a form that tells scientists how to answer questions and how not to answer questions, to put it to a media spokesperson? That's an important question. If they're free to answer, that's one thing. Clearly, they're not. This makes interesting reading, exactly the communication strategy for scientists. If you ever get a chance to read it, how to talk to journalists and how to respond properly according to this communication strategy. Certainly enlightening reading for us.
There has been a lot of discussion in Ottawa lately about secrets, lying, and withholding the truth, mainly because it has been suggested by, well, pretty much every newspaper in the country that this has become the standard operating procedure for the Harper government. That is the message this Prime Minister is sending to the voters, and yes, the children of Canada. The hell with the truth, the lie will set you free. And you know what? It's not good enough, because in a free and open society, when it comes to government operations, the people who pay the bills deserve to know the truth. And I know, Mr. Harper, sometimes the truth hurts, but the truth will not harm democracy. Only secrets and lies will do that.
So the scientists that I've talked to they're embarrassed, they're frustrated, they're protesting. Last week in Canada, we had hundreds of scientists hit the streets in their lab coats.
Scientists from across the country came out of their labs today and called on the government to stop cuts to funding for scientific research.
Start showing up wearing their lab coats, having come from their laboratory. Things are looking pretty bleak.
The federal government has cut funding for everything from freshwater research to climate change. And scientists say they're being muzzled, told not to talk to the public or even colleagues.
The information that is collected by scientists is not getting out there in the public space. And that means that Canadians are uninformed about important scientific issues.
Calvin Sandborn's Environmental Law Centre has launched a complaint. He says they have proof of a policy to control scientists, especially those doing research into climate change and the effects of oil and gas development. The Federal Information Commissioner is now investigating.
If a scientist shares the knowledge that they've gained with taxpayer-funded research, they can be fired. And we're saying that that's a remarkable threat to democracy.
What can happen when factual discoveries raise inconvenient questions for politicians? It's a conflict that has transformed environmental law in Canada, shaken the foundations of public institutions, and is damaging the reputation of Canada among scientists and scholars around the world.
But it's not just the scientists that are being muzzled and the climate research that's being shut down and people that are being fired. We've also seen an unprecedented attack on charitable organizations that deal with environmental research.
She was digging up 1,000 years of history, but it took just minutes to bury her career.
She said, "You have 5 minutes to collect important personal things," and I said, "Everything here is important to me. This is my life."
He was dedicated to reversing the destruction of our oceans.
You could hear a pin drop. People were ashen. We all knew what was happening.
Scientists and science decimated by a transformation in political priorities.
It crippled my life's work.
Obliterating years of talent and experience.
My entire research group disappeared.
Secret documents revealed through Freedom of Information this year show that the government eliminated all these environmental laws in Canada at the request of the oil industry because the environmental laws were in their way. The Enbridge Northern Gateway pipeline crosses 1,000 streams. And that would normally trigger an environmental assessment process. Well, when you have no laws, you have no environmental assessment. So when they eradicated all the environmental laws, 3,000 environmental assessments for major industrial projects in Canada were cancelled. Now those projects are just approved without environmental assessment.
Zipporah Berman, I saw you at the International Women's Earth and Climate Summit in Suffern, and you talked about your son having to respond to a question of his. We only have a minute, but explain.
One night at dinner, my son, who was 8 at the time, turned to me and said, "Mommy, why does the government think you're a terrorist?" Which is not really the conversation you want to have with your son. Because he had heard on the radio that on the Senate floor, the Harper government was proposing that we change the definition of the term domestic terrorism in Canada to include environmentalism.
And so what does that mean for you, and what does that mean for environmental activists? Where are you headed now? What are you going to do around tar sands?
Canadians who care about these issues are under attack by our own government.
They say, "I like his music, but stay out of politics."
What line did I cross? Musicians should stay out of politics? Is that right? Is that somebody said that? So
more than a few have said
is that one of the? Is that a great Canadian belief? is that it? That your profession should be considered and weighed carefully when deciding whether you have freedom of speech? That just doesn't make sense to me. Those are ludicrous comments that have nothing to do with reality. Those are defensive maneuvers, deflecting the truth away from people's sense of what's going on. People should wonder, what am I up there for? Have I always written about and sung about what concerned me? From Ohio to Southern Man to Rockin' in the Free World to all of these crazy songs that I wrote about things that were going on that people sang, that I sang, to all the things that I said. Are they saying that now that those were all bebop-a-lula and I shouldn't talk about anything? What? That's ridiculous.
And we're being told that if that what we do is not in the national interest unless we support the oil industry's agenda. But I think this government has overreached.
So is it okay to have the government monitor social media conversations and then to wade in and correct some of those conversations? With more on this, let's go to technology expert Carmi Levy. He's on the line from Montreal. Carmi, do you think the government's monitoring what you and I are saying right now? Is this whole thing getting out of line or what?
What exactly is the government's aim here? And what do they hope to accomplish with what they find out? And as they accumulate this information online, this data on us, where does that data go? The optics of it are potentially very Big Brother-ish. I'm going to wonder every time I post online, is someone from the federal government watching what I'm saying?
Right.
Do I have to change the temper or the tone of my argument simply because I worry that I'm being watched? It is a little bit scary.
I'm sure they will argue, well, we're just trying to get correct information to the people of Canada.
And that's all well and good, but billboards can't reach me in my bedroom. When the government uses social media, it can.
How would you like it if the government was able to watch everything you do online without even asking?
It's a troubling question, and it's why the battle to protect your online privacy rights from a new crime bill is heating up. As St. John Alexander reports, privacy advocates are hoping a series of provocative new videos will convince Ottawa to back off.
Now imagine this, coming home to an officer in your kitchen. He wasn't invited, doesn't have a warrant, and there's nothing you can do about it. It's just a short video designed to catch your attention about an issue that's only just catching on.
I hope that these videos just show Canadians what they're in for, and hopefully they, call their MP.
They could do it to anyone, at any time, without a warrant.
It's a blatant violation of privacy.
Your name, phone number, home address, email address, and perhaps most importantly, your IP address.
This is the key. This unlocks the doors to all of your identity on the internet, all of your traffic, who you talk to, when, sometimes your geolocation.
I think it's just carrying it a little too far, and it's a little too big brother for me.
I don't know. I wouldn't be comfortable with it. I'm very uneasy.
The bill is expected to be part of a whole bunch of crime laws the government wants to pass. BC-based Open Media is behind the campaign to stop it, saying the so-called spy law has never been debated.
We've seen in other jurisdictions, like in the UK with the Murdoch scandal and stuff like that, unchecked power without oversight is a dangerous thing.
So Parliament is back, and we learned this week that the cornerstone of Stephen Harper's fall agenda will be yet another big budgetary omnibus bill. Government tables a budget. They know every member of their party has to vote for the budget or they lose their jobs. And let's face it, a lot of these characters don't have that many options in this world. And seeing as they know that everyone is going to vote for it, instead of just putting budgetary things in the budget, math, they fill it full of goodies no one's even heard of before. In the last budget, in the jobs budget, there was a provision that allows the CIA and the FBI to come across the border and arrest Canadians on Canadian soil. And I know, I sound like a conspiracy theorist with a tinfoil hat just saying it out loud, but it's true, it happened, and there was no debate. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. Even some of Harper's own MPs will admit privately that they had no idea what was in that last budget, just that it was 400 pages. You know how you and I just click accept when entering into an iTunes contract? That's how MPs vote on the budget. And now we find out we're getting another omnibus bill. Aren't we lucky? In North Korea, they only get one every year. And listen, don't take my word for it. One of the most elegant pleas ever made against omnibus bills was made not that long ago in the House of Commons by a handsome young man by the name of Stephen Harper. He said it, omnibus bills are anti-democratic, they're a slap in the face to MPs and voters. See, this fascinates me because it's one thing if you don't know any better, but he clearly does. He just doesn't care. Who does that? I wouldn't want to spend 5 minutes in that guy's head for all the money in the world because he knows right from wrong here. He's on record, but he has decided it is okay to do wrong in order to advance the right. And democracy no longer enters into it. That's what our government is doing. We're spending more money than ever before on action plan ads, and the action plan doesn't exist anymore. In fact, the only action going on is the action of buying ads saying there's action, even though there's no action. And now, they're just starting to make stuff up. There was an action plan ad on TV the other night saying the government loves the environment. I mean, come on. Some people, they think this government is doing a great job. Some people think not so much. That's politics, but no one thinks they love the environment. Not loving the environment is part of their brand, I swear. One of these days we're going to find out the whole action plan thing is the result of a bet between the finance minister and the prime minister over how stupid Canadians really are. Hey Jim, here's one. How about we'll show a girl running through a meadow, then we'll cut to a puppy, then we'll show the Rockies and say it's part of Canada's action plan. Great, what's it mean? I don't know, but we're shooting in IMAX. And every action plan ad ends the same way. Visit our website, find out what's in it for you. Well, I'll save you the trip. I'll tell you what's in it for all of us this year. Another bill for advertising, $78 million. That's not an action plan, that's madness.
What does the Canadian Economic Action Plan mean to you?
It means my car company doesn't have to pay back nearly $6 billion in loans.
It means the people of my ministry can file over $10 million in expenses for a pipeline project that doesn't exist.
It means that even though my oil company made over $2 billion last year,
we still get a $144 million grant from the government.
If you want to find out what the Canadian Economic Action Plan can do for you, and you're a multinational corporation or a minister, contact the Government of Canada. If you're not, never mind.
This is our fault. We have all become comfortable with a system where the Prime Minister can simply close Parliament on a whim. Well, there's a term for that. It's called taxation without representation. In the United States, it led to the American Revolution. In Canada, it's becoming business as usual. Democracy takes practice. We either use it or lose it.
Touching all the people, sharing all the world. What's next? They say I'm a dreamer. Just a second. I hope someday you'll join us, and the world will live as one.